Hello! This video will give you tips and advice on student teaching. This is especially good for those aspiring teachers out there who's thinking of going into teaching, or even if you are currently studying to be a teacher but you have a placement coming up. These tips will be really useful for you. Now these tips and advice is what I've learned or what I've observed or what I've gone through when I was student teaching, and it is something that I picked up along the way, and hopefully this will also help you. Now the first thing with student teaching is you need to expect the unexpected. Different schools have different students, and every class will have a different culture or have a different learning environment. So you really need to go in and actually have a sense of what the classroom environment is. Especially year 8 and 9, they're just in class mucking around. And those are the kind of students that you need to kind of think when you go into a lesson to observe. You got to think, how are you going to cater for students like that? Because every different classes, different year levels have different classrooms with different learning environments. So how would you tailor your lessons, your own lessons, to engage these kind of learners? Another thing that you might want to think about would be, how would you begin and end a lesson? At the end of the lesson, maybe ask them, what did you learn today? Always expect the unexpected. One thing that I realized is that the room environment, the tables and the chair, does make an impact on the lesson. Some classes with the kids, they work better if there is a group of tables and they sit like in a table. Some work better if it's like a U shape and you're in the middle, and there's tables along there and the students sit around. That will encourage discussion. Some classes work better if you just clear all the tables and chairs and you get them to like bring the chair and sit there with no tables. Leave your books and your pens and your iPads at the back of the classroom so that they don't have any distraction while you're actually talking. So it really depends on, like I say, the classroom culture, the classroom environment, the learning environment. You just have to kind of figure out, how can you as a teacher or student teacher best serve these kids with different learning needs or different abilities or just different personalities. That is the big one. You can't go into every placement knowing just because you went to your last placement the kids will be the same. It's not. Some schools are different. You're just there to learn, and you just have to expect the unexpected. Number 2 is to fake it till you make it. Student teaching can be very daunting. It can, like, you feel really, especially when you need to go in front of a classroom and you don't know half of the kids and they're just looking at you. You just have to act confident. If you're not sure what you're doing, the kids can pick it up. You are pretty much being you're an actor, you're an actress, you're doing a performance for them in front of the classroom. So if you show a sign of weakness, they will use that against you. They will pick it up. If you are unsure of something, they will pick it up and they will lose respect for you. Always act like you know what you're doing, even if in your head you have no idea what you're doing. But make sure you have a lesson plan as your backup. Never go to class unprepared, because it's really hard to fake it that you're confident if you have no plan. That's very important. Always have a plan. It's better to overplan than underplan. The third thing is to have a good classroom management or behavioral management plan. I went into a classroom and I told them, look, this is my expectations. When I'm talking, you're listening, or get a cue. Like I did macaroni when I wanted to say something or when I wanted the class to be quiet, and they have to like say and cheese, and they really like that because it's fun, it's engaging. Or I had a bell where I rang, and every time when I ring it, I want them to be quiet, and anyone that is talking after the bell has rung, that is still talking after the bell has rung, will get their name on the board. So have a good plan and make sure the students know what the class expectation is before. I know you might think you're a student teacher and you're going into a classroom and you don't want to mess up how they do things. But essentially, when you're going to a classroom and you're actually student teaching, the classroom is yours. And I am pretty sure 100% of the time, your mentor teacher will support you on that. They'll probably tell you, have your own plan, lay it out for them. Never embarrass them, never just say, why did you do this? You're not supposed to do this, blah, blah, blah. Don't do that. Try and have a chat with them after class. Have a good behavioral management plan. Make it clear from the very beginning that you start teaching them so that they know what you expect of them. And that will show that you mean business, and then they will respect you for that. The next one is something that I would like to call planning and execution. To do a lesson or to actually run a class, there's two elements. First of all, you have to plan it. You have to think of all the activities. You have to know what you're teaching. If you're not familiar with what you're teaching, you should really go home and just read it and try to know. As long as you go into the classroom knowing more than the kids, you'll be fine. Try to bring something fun and engaging. We are teaching kids of the 21st century, so we've come so far from the traditional classroom approach where the teachers will stand in front. I remember when I was in school, the teachers would be in front, they'll copy notes on the board, and you just have a textbook and you just open your exercise book and copy. That's how I went to school, and that's how I learned. But times have changed. Now they have iPads. Every kid have an iPad. They do a lot of student-centered learning. I'm a big fan of student-centered learning. I think that students can really, really offer a lot of insight into the lesson. And another thing that I'm also a big fan is inquiry learning. So that's also the same as, that can be related to student-centered learning. Inquiry learning is when you learn by asking questions, by inquiring about something. So you can, do a group discussion based on that. Get them to ask, why is something like that? Why is that? And then extend that, get them to explore it further. Because I find that if you run class lessons like that, even I'm learning. Like when I run a lesson and get them to talk among themselves, I learn from them, and it's so funny because I'm not they're teaching me, and I'm teaching them, so they're learning from each other. That's a good thing. We're learning together with the students. You have to remember that we are not a know-it-all. Okay, don't go into a classroom thinking, oh my god, I know this. You just have to listen, and I'm just gonna give you the knowledge, and you're just gonna listen and absorb the knowledge. No, you gotta get them to talk. Okay, so when they're talking, it means that they're learning. Got to think about, how are you going to execute the lesson? How are you going to make sure that this lesson run as well as you thought? So you're the teacher. You have to think, how am I going to, as a teacher, going to impart the knowledge that I want the students to learn in the best and most effective and the most efficient way possible? Another thing that for you to think about is to try and set a small goal, or a small goal for every lesson. There's never going to be one lesson that you are truly happy with everything about it. And you might go home at the end of the day thinking, oh my god, I am the worst teacher in the world. I did not do well. You might have a bad day, and you just go home and you might just think, oh, I'm such a bad teacher. Why did I get into teaching? Always set a small goal for every lesson. So you might have a lesson that's very, very complicated, but set a small goal, okay? No matter what, if you have achieved that small goal, even if the lesson was just a disaster, as long as you achieve that small goal, that lesson is worth it. Have that mindset. You know why? Because if you have a bad lesson one day and you go home and you are in such a bad mood, you might think, oh my god, what am I doing? What happened? That night you might have to do another lesson for the next lesson. So if you go home with that negative mindset, the next time when you make your next lesson plan, you're not going to put in as much effort because you're like, oh, I'm such a bad teacher, this lesson didn't go well, why should I put as much effort as the last one into this lesson? Because I mean, the last lesson didn't go very well. If you have that mindset, your next lessons will be like a disaster because you're not putting in that effort, because you have that negative outlook, you have that negative mindset. If you go home having a small goal for the class and you've achieved that small goal, and go home with a positive outlook, because you know what? Every day is different. Even if today you have a bad lesson, tomorrow will be a new day. So if you go home with that attitude, you'll be like, right, this lesson was a disaster. How can I do it better? How can I improve it and make sure that it doesn't happen again? And then you plan your awesome new lesson based on what you've learned from your previous lesson. So always have a positive mindset, and to have a positive mindset, have a small goal for every lesson. So have that small goal and have that positive attitude and have the positive outlook. I know it's really hard. I found it really hard as well. But then once you change that mindset, everything will be so much better for you. The last tip that I can really give you is, student teaching is a learning curve. You're pretty much going on a journey. No one is perfect. You might think that it's not going well, but you're learning. And I honestly believe that you should make as much mistake as possible, because you have a mentor helping you. That's like amazing in itself, because when you start teaching, you're not gonna have someone to like watch every one of your lessons. You're pretty much gonna be in a classroom alone with like 20 or 30 kids. So to have someone at the back of the classroom, or even helping you while you're teaching, it's invaluable. So it's a learning curve, and I believe that you should make as much mistake as possible, because that's how you learn. If you go into student teaching and you go into a classroom and expect not to make any mistake, you expect to just be amazing at what you do, then how are you gonna learn? You're not gonna learn. Teaching is a vocation where you're constantly learning, you're constantly trying to do better. That's why after every lesson or after every day, always reflect back on what you did. Reflect on every lesson, reflect on everything that you did in the classroom. How can you do it better? How can the lesson be better than what you just had? Because there is always going to be something that you need to improve. Don't ever come out of a class and think, yep, that's it, that's right, awesome, let's just walk away and not think about the lesson. I know at the end of the day, you might want to just leave the school, go home and just forget about it. But make sure you always think back on what did you do that day that you can improve on. Also, think about what you did that day that worked. Always remember the strategies or whatever that you did that seems to work for that particular classroom or that particular student. That's pretty much all the tips and advice that I have for you. So I hope you found this at least helpful. Yeah, thank you for listening.